Hey guys, this is Lauren Lando from ESS. Today in the series of interviews that we're doing, I am here today with legendary strength coach Dr. Gene Coleman. Gene has served as the strength and conditioning coach for the Houston Astros for over 32 years and still is a consultant to the Texas Rangers, and he does a ton of different work with Major League Baseball Strength Coaches Association, where he provides content, education, and he really tries to build the practice and the practitioners to have a greater depth of education and a greater understanding of the sciences that we blend into performance training. It's an absolute honor to have him here. He's served as a mentor to me, and just his works has really set the stage for a lot of us. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I have a couple questions for you. I have a lot of personal questions I want to ask you. But when first of all, how many, you've worked with a ton of Hall of Famers, I'm sure. Do you know how many off the top of your head?
I think there's 7. 7
Hall of Famers. That's amazing. Amazing group of names. We won't even talk about the names, but just to know that there's 7 Hall of Famers is absolutely out of this world. What typical traits do you see with athletes who maybe make it to the all-star level or even to that Hall of Fame level? What are the characteristic traits that you tend to find and see?
Well, I think number 1 is character, and number 2 is work ethic. And so, if they have flaws in their character, if they have chinks in their armor, we were talking about this just a moment ago, and we don't want to upset people by saying fat kids, but typically you always take the worst player and you put him in right field. If you're picking up, childhood games, you're choosing teams. And so what we find is if an individual has a chink in his character, that is always going to come up at crunch time. It's always going to be the ball's going to find the fat kid in crunch time. And it's going to find his weakness, whether that weakness is that he's poorly prepared academically or that he likes to socialize too much. That's going to happen. The second thing you look for is work ethic. We're looking for the guy that's the first one there and the last one to leave. He doesn't necessarily have to be the best athlete, because if you have to be the best athlete on the field, then there are a lot of guys that aren't going to be playing.
Right.
We've all heard the story about Michael Jordan didn't make his junior high school basketball team. Well, hey, Tom Seaver and Roger Clemens, they weren't the best players on their high school team. So we're looking for those guys that have the work ethic. And when you look at a guy, and you go through baseball historically, that's what you find. If you find the guys, they were the first one there, they were the last one to leave, they were willing to do whatever it took at the time.
I tend to find, you tell me what you think, that there's an element of just the guys who love the game. The guys who love the game will be there, first one's in, last one's out, but then there's also an element of the guys who understand, have that passion for the game, they become coachable. And to me, coachability is a huge one.
Yeah, not only do you have to have the ability to learn, but you have to have a willingness to learn. And we're getting ready to start spring training in about 20 days. And when they have their first full squad meeting, every manager, and I've seen a ton of them in both leagues, they will sit there and they will tell their players, here's what we want. We expect you to be on time. Right? We expect you to have respect for the game. And we expect you to be a good teammate. Have respect for your teammates. And if you'll do those 3 things, if you will be on time, if you will have a respect for the game, and you will be a good teammate, the rest of it will take care of itself. But I've seen a number of players who, as you said, are not coachable.
Well, that's a recipe for success right there, those three qualities. So I have a question for you. Say I'm an aspiring strength coach coming out of my degree, and I'm really excited to maybe work in the minor leagues and maybe have dreams and aspirations to go to the major leagues. If you're the head guy, what are you looking for?
Well, number 1, Major League Baseball has a minimum prerequisite, and so you have to have a degree and you have to be certified by the NSCA.
Okay.
So, assuming you've got those things, the thing that I'm looking for is I'm looking for the same thing in a strength coach that I'm looking for in a player. I want that person that is high energy, the person that is willing to take direction, because you don't know everything when you walk through. And I'm looking for that person that is inquisitive. he asks a lot of questions. They want to learn, and then after that, I'm looking for somebody that has experience. I want somebody that can do it. Yep. And my philosophy has always been, if you can't do it, you shouldn't attempt to teach it.
Love it.
Because you're just going to embarrass yourself, and the players are going to look at you kind of funny.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because I think a lot of people, we always talk about this industry is kind of like who you know, but however, that first job, you've got to get your foot in the door some way, shape, or form. And to me, I always tend to look at the resumes a little bit longer if I'm hiring somebody based on persistency. How persistent were they? Did they call me? Did they follow up? Did they have a resume and a cover letter? Like, how professional were they, and were they persistent at knocking down my door? So now you are the strength coach, and now you're hiring your team underneath you. What are the qualifications you look at from a skill set, from a method standpoint? Say you're an unbelievable guy in the weight room. Do you then look for somebody that has more of a passion or an understanding of the movement side? Or vice versa, if you're a movement coach, will you then try to bring somebody onto your staff that is maybe stronger in another side than maybe you are?
Yeah, I'm not looking for somebody that can do the same thing that I can do. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for somebody that can do something that I can't do. I'm looking for somebody that can teach me something that I don't know.
Perfect.
And so my opinion right now, and my recommendation is, if you are a strength coach and you're looking to add an assistant strength coach, that you look for a movement specialist. You look for somebody that can teach your players how to move properly. We've talked about this. How do you start? How do you stop? How do you change directions? How do you do this? All of this under control. And what we find is most of the injuries that are occurring in the game of baseball are occurring on the bases. Right? And is it because we don't run enough? Is it because we don't know how to run properly? Is it because we can't stop and control our momentum? So I think that's an important aspect. Players run the bases every day, but they don't always run them hard, and they don't always run them properly. And then when the crunch times come, late in the game, and they're fatigued, injuries are going to occur. Mm-hmm. And so I believe if you know how to move properly, then when you get fatigued, you will be able to control your body better than if you're doing it improperly. Because when you add stress to movement, as you have taught me, the movement doesn't get better. It usually gets worse.
Yeah, movement quality drops, and if you haven't practiced it well, what's going to happen when the lights come on?
Absolutely. And so not only just in a game situation, but over the course of the season. The season is 162 games in 180 days. There are only 18 days off, and half of those are on the road. And you've got day games after night games. You've got extra inning games, so we have that opportunity for fatigue because we can't always recover. We don't always have 24 hours in which to recover.
That's a good point, because I think a lot of times people look at overtraining, but overtraining could simply be an under-recovered. You weren't able to recover based on the travel schedule, based on doubleheader, based on back-to-back games. So this is me being selfish in this interview. So go into some detail, not as much detail as you probably can, but give me an idea of what 1 week looks like in the regular season as a major league strength coach. Talk to me about trying to pick and choose the exercise selection you're going to use when you're on the road, when you may not have the facilities that need. Give us some insight to what you've seen and what you've encountered.
Well, there is no typical, right? And my first day on the job, I had a manager, Bill Verdon, and Bill was a Marine. He was hard-nosed, and he told me the very first day, he said, I'm going to give you one word, and if you can take this word and you can apply it, you might have a long career here. If you cannot apply it, you might not make the day. And that word was adjust. He said, you have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to adjust to day games after night games. You have to adjust to what kind of facilities you have, and what kind of facilities you want. The weather may come into play. We may have the game may go into extra innings, and that will affect you. The player that you want to work with may be injured, or maybe have a bad attitude that particular day, or have problems at home. So there is no typical day. You start off as typical, and then you adjust. You make the best plan that you can, and then you adjust. If you are at home, you've got starting players, you've got extra men, you've got pitchers, and those are broken down into starting pitchers and relief pitchers. You've got 25 guys, you've got one facility, you've got you, and you got to figure out how am I going to get the best workout in, for each of these 25 players, plus the 2 or 3 guys that are on the disabled list.
Wow.
And then to that you have to add the fact that there's one guy that can't do anything by himself. So you pretty much have to hold his hand, and while you're holding his hand, 8 or 10 guys are standing around in a circle. So you have to budget your time. You have to have a tremendous amount of time management, and you have to have the players buy into it, so that some of them are willing to work early, and some of them are willing to work late. And then when you get on the road, you've got that problem. You've got some places have visiting weight rooms, and sometimes the visiting weight room's not much bigger than a phone booth.
I've heard that about Wrigley.
Well, Wrigley has just remodeled, and I'm looking forward to seeing it, so that they will now have a visiting weight room. But for decades, the weight room in Wrigley was a set of unmatched dumbbells in size and a stability ball that were in a corner of the training room between the shelf that contained the tape and the aspirin and the trainer's lockers.
Wow.
And so it was extremely small. And then they had one stationary bicycle, which was in the corner of the weight room between the training room and the food prep area.
Wow.
And then if you wanted to go work out, and use their weight room, you had to walk across the field. And so that means if you're going before the game, you have to go walk directly across home plate. And then after the game with the fans there, leaving, you have to walk across the field. And that's bad.
Wow.
But the Red Sox were worse because you had to walk through the fans. You had to walk under the concourse area and through the fans to get to their weight room in their clubhouse. And so if you're going to work in their clubhouse, and let's say you just had a skirmish on the field, that's a tough situation.
Right, may not be working out that day.
Yeah, you might not want to go that day. Or if you've gotten beat 8-0, you're not really excited about going over there. And if you've won 8-0 and you go over there, they may not be excited to see you.
Might be getting beers dumped on your head.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would like to give you a typical day. I can tell you that most strength coaches are there by noon, and they leave an hour to an hour and a half after the game. And most of the games are over at 10:30 or 11, so it's an easy 12-hour day.
Well, and I think you bring up a very good point. Whether you're going into the strength coach realm in the major leagues, minor leagues, professional sports, or if you're working as a trainer or performance coach in a private sector, number one thing, you're going to grind. You're going to put in long days, and you're going to grind. And the second part of that, you're going to have to adjust. Regardless of what branch of the field you're in, you're going to have to learn to adjust on the fly. And I think that's what exceptional coaches do. Now, I have another question for you. I could spend all day asking you questions, but I'm going to ask you, 32 years as the strength coach for the Astros, can you think of one or two moments that were the highlight?
Oh, going to the World Series in 2005 was definitely a highlight. Going to the playoffs for the first time in the history of the organization in 1980. And back then we had only American League and National League, and so there were no playoffs. We had East and we had West, and so we had to play the Phillies, and we ended up losing the Phillies in I think 14, 15 innings in 5 games, and they ended up winning the World Series. But those were highlights. There was a period between 1990, I believe, and 1999 where we were in the playoffs every year. And it seemed like we were always either playing the Braves or the Cardinals. Those were good. I mean, once you get to October, and you're in the playoffs, it makes it all worthwhile.
Right. All that hard work in that off season is paying off by playing in that postseason.
Absolutely. If you don't get to the postseason, it's not a bummer, but you don't feel like your year was wasted, but it's not as much fun.
Right. This has been awesome for me to talk to you because you and I have spoke about this before, but when I was growing up, when I was between the ages of 7 to 12, I would always go visit my dad in Houston every summer. And I made countless games to the Astrodome. I remember watching Jose Cruz, Mike Scott, Phil Garner, Terry Poole, all these guys, and to know that one day I would actually be here talking to you, knowing you, and actually interviewing somebody who I watched all those years take care of those players is absolutely a really cool thing for me to see this thing go full circle in my life. So I appreciate your time in this interview, and any parting words you want to leave with aspiring strength coaches?
Do your homework. Do your work. Be willing to work. Do more than expected. One of the things I always did in spring training was we put our running program together. So Mondays we have the program that what we're going to do on Tuesday, and of course we might have to adjust if it rains on Tuesday or if the field is a little bit wet. But I always went out at 5:30 in the morning. And the players aren't going to be there until 10, but I would go out at 5:30 in the morning and do the workout. And sometimes I would have to make adjustments on the workout, so I'd have to do the workout twice. But the whole deal was, if I wanted to see how difficult the workout was going to be, I knew what my players could do. And if it was easy for me, it wasn't hard enough for them.
Yeah.
And so, I always told the players, initially I told them, I will not ever ask you to do anything that I can't do. And as I got older, it was, I will not ask you to do anything that I will not attempt to do. So, they knew, when I said, hey, it's time to run or it's time to do this, they knew that I'd done it. That okay, he at least he's done it. And we had one situation where a pitcher told me he didn't want to run with me because I ran too fast. And his teammates heard about that and said, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, don't let the coach outrun you, right?
Yeah, especially at the age I was at the time. And, that one statement and his teammates' reaction changed the work ethics of that kid around. And after that, we never had a problem with it. But somebody just simply had to point it out, and that's what being a good teammate is.
Absolutely. Well, that's great advice and great perspective. I think that, too, when players see that you're willing to do the workout yourself, that you've put thought into it. Yes. There's a rationale to it. I think what it also does is it creates empathy, where if it's a very tough exercise workout, you went through it, and now when they get to the more difficult part of that workout, you can sit there and you can be there with them and say, hey, rep 8, it's going to get hard. I'm telling you what, you're almost there. You're almost to the end. And so it creates that empathy. So I think that's a beautiful strategy.
Yeah, I learned it in college and didn't know what I was learning. I took theory of coaching football from Bum Phillips. Bum, I don't know whether he was the originator, but he always said, players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that, was a byproduct of that, knowing that I cared enough to do it myself rather than say, we're going to do this. I used to have a running joke with Jeff Bagwell. I used to say, Jeff, we're going to do this or else. And he'd say, or else what? I said, or else I'm going to get fired. And then he would laugh, and I never had a problem with him doing it. But
but seriously,
yeah,
I'm going to get fired.
Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. The athletes don't care what you know until they know you care. I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. Well, I appreciate your time, Gene, and again, thank you to all the information that you have put out there over the years and really created the trailblazed the path for a lot of us aspiring strength coaches. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate being here.
Thank you.